Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Well, welcome to Conversations with Niki. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is always a privilege and a pleasure to be with you. I'm Niki Seberini, and as I said, this is the show Conversations with Niki, where you are entertained, informed and inspired. I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners. That's Eldo's FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, MC 90.3 FM in Plettenberg Bay, Neisner FM, Wild Coast FM and Bay FM. And I would just like to announce that next week, Conversations with Niki is turning 1 year old. And I just am very, very excited about that. And I want to thank you for being a part of this wonderful, wonderful journey that we have been on, you and I. And it's just been really, really exciting, starting off with radio today and then getting more and more syndication partner listeners and just listening to your requests and doing the kind of shows that you want to hear is just an absolute delight each and every week. It really, really is. So I'm having a very powerful and very interesting guest who's going to be coming onto the show. We've had to arrange it for the 20th of May because we're going to be doing a telephonic interview and we're speaking to her, and she's in the United States of America. So we've had to juggle the times around a little bit. Now, I don't know if you've heard of the wonderful work of Byron Katie. I had never heard of Byron Katie until someone told me about the work that she does. And when I say the work, that's in fact what she calls it, the work. And after doing a lot of research, watching a lot of YouTube videos and actually getting her book and reading it, it's just shifted so many things and turned so many things around. I mean, she is a spiritual mentor to millions and millions of people. In fact, Oprah Winfrey interviewed her and went through a whole lot of her soul series with Byron Katie. And Byron Katie talks about what happens in our heads, the stories that we create for ourselves, and then she asks the question, is it true? And when you actually think about the statement that you've made and you think, well, is it true? And am I 100% sure it's true? And who would I be if it wasn't true? And all these things start to shift. Now, why am I telling you? Because yes, she is coming onto the show, but I'm giving one listener an opportunity to do the work with Byron Katie on the show. So if I have tweaked your interest in any way or form, if Byron Katie is someone that you have followed and you think that her work is phenomenal, get hold of me. We are going to be choosing one lucky winner to, as I said, do the work with Byron Katie, and hopefully all of you will be able to witness this wonderful transformation. So go along to the website, www.conversationswithniki.co.za. Conversations with Niki is one word, and Niki is spelled N-I-K-I. And there is a little contact me, and contact me, give me all your details, and if you're the one, we will contact you back. Also, you can go onto my Facebook page, which is Conversations with Niki, and you can like it, and then you can just send me a little message there, and we're going to put all the names together, and then my producer is going to pull one of the names out of a hat, and yeah, then we're going to record that show. It's going to be very, very interesting. And that's all in celebration of 1 year of Conversations with Niki. Well, today, yet another fascinating conversation coming your way. I remember it was a couple of years ago when I was on another station that I interviewed a fascinating man, and for the first time I became aware of something called adult children. After the interview, I just thought about it so much because it influenced so many areas of my life personally and people that I know. And the subject just seems to have expanded and expanded. So it's one of the subjects that we've decided to tackle on Conversations with Niki today. And adult children, I'm not going to expand it at all. I have people in the studio who will be doing that, and on the telephone who will be doing that. And I really hope that during the listening, during the show, there may be something that just resonates with you. There may be something that connects with you. And then I hope that this is an opportunity for you to open up channels of communication within your realm and within your family, within your world. So I'd like to welcome our guests today on Conversations with Niki. First, I'd like to welcome Pat. Pat was the man that I interviewed a couple of years ago and who had such a profound effect on me, just what he was saying. And he is a member of ACA, and that is Adult Children. So Pat, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Hi, Niki.
With that beautiful voice. And Leroy, thank you so much also for coming on to the show. Hi, Leroy.
Hi, Niki.
And Marguerite, also ACA member. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, thanks, Niki. I'm glad to be here.
And on the line, I'm hoping we have Professor Michael Simpson, who is the cyber shrink for Health 24. Prof, are you there?
Yes, indeed.
Hi, Prof. Welcome, welcome. Thanks to you also for joining us. So I'm going to start off with you, Pat, only because you were my first introduction to adult children, and perhaps there are people who are listening right now who are saying it doesn't make sense. Adult child, how does that go together? What is it all about?
An adult child, Nikki, is a person who grew up in an environment where alcoholism prevailed, and this child has to learn ways of survival. They don't grow up in the normal way that children who find themselves in healthy families do. So what happens is that because of the survival mechanisms that they learn while they are young, which help them to be able to survive the environment they live in, which is an unstable environment, an uncertain environment. Once they've grown up, those patterns of behavior persist in their lives, and it is the very behaviors that help them to be able to survive their childhood that begin to destroy their adulthood.
Now, you spoke about children who grow up in a family with alcoholics.
Yes.
And I, asking a few questions and speaking to some people, sometimes there weren't immediate alcoholics in the family. Sometimes
Yes.
it was a grandparent or a relative. Can we also say it's growing up in a dysfunctional household?
Yes.
Can we
Yes.
widen that net as well?
There's a writer, Janet Wojtis. She's the one who came up with this concept of an adult child.
Mm-hmm.
And initially her focus was on adult children of alcoholics specifically. And after she had written her book, Adult Children of Alcoholics, what happened is that many other people identified with the symptoms and with the behaviors that these people and the feelings that they felt. And she in her latest book has sort of expanded the concept and said this applies not only to the adult children of alcoholics, but it applies generally to dysfunctional families.
Thank you very much for that, Pat. Prof, I'm going to bring you in here because let's talk about dysfunctional families. And how does one define a dysfunctional family?
Well, how long is a piece of string? In a sense, by dysfunctional family, we mean a family that's not functioning well.
Mm-hmm.
And some malfunction in interesting and not very serious ways, and some malfunction grossly and the normal behavior that might be accepted within the family may be quite bizarre and awful to other people if they look into it from outside.
I mean, I'm just trying to establish that, because can we even define what dysfunctional is? I think if any person goes into any household, they would be able to find something that is slightly, I don't know, out of the norm or perhaps unusual. And would we then define that as dysfunctional?
Well, I think all definitions depend on why you're defining them and where you're standing when you're looking at whatever it is you're defining. Often a family that seems chaotic to anybody else sees their way of behaving as pretty normal and might think the rest of us have rather strange families because we don't do things the way they do.
So I want to, and the reason I'm trying to clarify that is because I'm wanting listeners to realize that perhaps, as I explained to Pat, that and as Pat then explained further, that we're not just looking at alcoholics, we're not just looking at very obvious dysfunctional families. There could be people who are listening where there are, unusual behaviors within the family structure, and this is having an impact on them in their later life.
Yes, it's an area that people haven't until quite recently looked at. Perhaps the earliest group was those who were describing adult children of alcoholics, and that was simply the idea that they were children of alcoholics who are now adult, but still showing effects of what had happened when they were younger. Okay. But there are many ways in which we may be affected by family experiences. You may grow up in an otherwise reasonably ordinary family, but your mother is schizophrenic and has hallucinations. How do you adapt to that? How do you cope with that? taking even physical examples, children who grow up with deaf parents or blind parents show a wide range of ways of adapting, usually not ones that create later problems. It seems more the psychological difficulties of that echo and reverberate down life.
Thanks, Professor. Leroy, I'm going to bring you into the conversation right now, because let's look at your story so that our listeners can begin to understand and get a better idea of what it is to be an adult child.
Okay. Hi, I'm Leroy. So, sister, I'm used to starting it like that.
Hi, Leroy.
Hi, Leroy.
Yes. Kind of. My mom was an alcoholic. By my definition, she's actually passed away at the moment. Well, she's now passed away. But looking back, there were certain times in my life when I observed her drinking behavior, and I started to adapt my behavior to pacify the alcoholic. So if my mom she had come home and she was feeling in a rage, I would codependently change my behavior to adjust myself to that environment. So if she was picking on me, I would take her mind off me by complimenting her earrings or giving her a drink or trying to pacify her. And like at that point, I've realized that I stopped behaving like a child and I started to manipulate. And I became a very, very powerful manipulator. And that didn't serve me well in my adulthood, but I survived with that tool as a kid.
Let's I just want to ask you about your mom drinking. You said that, she would drink and you would try and turn the situation around. When you said by your definition you felt that she was an alcoholic, I mean, was she drinking every night? And again, I'm asking this question because we live in a country where drinking is just something that many people do. It's socially acceptable. People talk about going to the pub after work and having a couple of whiskeys or a couple of beers, coming home, opening up a bottle of wine. What is acceptable and what is not? When did you start to become concerned?
Okay, well, in terms of like calling someone else an alcoholic, that's essentially taking their inventory, and I don't have any right to do that.
Yeah.
You can only call yourself by your own definition.
Okay.
But with me, like when I was thinking if I had a drinking problem or not, like if you drink and there's problems, you're a problem drinker, and there's a whole scope of areas where you could define yourself. But with me, I never really enjoyed drinking. I didn't like what it did to my home. But when I was 25, a girlfriend of mine passed away in a car accident, and myself and the group of friends, what we did is we drank, and like it took me. I ended up going on like a 9-year drinking binge after that.
And you weren't a drinker before that?
No, not necessarily.
So you grew up in a household where your mother drank. You were able to manipulate the situation. What other things? I mean, how else do you feel that you were affected growing up in this environment with this mom that would go into this kind of rage?
So sometimes if I did something really well, I'd get praise for that. So I started to do things for validation and approval seeking from my mom, and that resulted in me kind of having low self-esteem and low self-worth, and I'd validate myself by other people's opinion of myself.
Give us an example, if you don't mind.
So I have a weight problem, and I've just been battling with it for years, but my mom would treat me differently if I had lost weight or not. So I grew up with the opinion that if I'd put on weight, I was worth less. So having to deal with that, so regardless of what I look like, I'm still a human being and I can contribute as a human being to society.
Your parents got divorced. Your mom left your dad, didn't she?
Yes. My dad was, I believe that from the research that I've done, his mom was an alcoholic, and he kind of repeated the behavior. And when my mom started drinking excessively in their marriage, my dad tried to control it. And that is a big symptom, or I don't know what you call it, or what thing that adult children do is like this obsessive need to control.
Control.
And to manipulate and to try and control that environment.
So are you saying, I just want to be clear on every step, are you saying that you develop these behaviors as a child to survive this ordeal in your childhood, and you almost carry it through as an adult, and then it affects you as an adult? So you're not moving to the next stage. You're almost stuck in the patterns and the behavior that you created to survive whatever it is you were in, and you're stuck there. Is that how it is?
Yeah.
Is that essentially what it is?
Yes, because I think codependently I started living for everybody else, living for my mom, living for this approval seeking. So when the time came for me to emerge as an individual and as an adult, I'd lost that identity development.
So then, how did this work, Leroy? You lost your girlfriend,
Yeah.
and then you started drinking. You said you went on a 9-year binge, and how did it? How did you then realize and join ACA and start to turn things around for yourself? I mean, I'm sure it's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Often, like in my thing, I wasn't really honest with myself, and I didn't really know the difference between right and wrong. I was just surviving. I did end up in trouble with the law, and I actually went to an AA meeting to better my defense. And I sat there and I listened, and eventually, like, things started making sense to me, and I could relate to people. So I went into into 12-step recovery through Alcoholics Anonymous, and I worked that program. And then I started to realize that it's actually a little bit bigger than what my problem is now. That it actually comes from my childhood and my feelings of low self-esteem and self-worth and inappropriate aggression and all of that. So I started realizing that I could behave like an alcoholic without a drink in my hand. And I thought, sure, maybe it's actually my behaviors that's like an area that I need to focus on. And then I actually realized that I was behaving like my mom without even having a drink in my hand, and then that was really scary too.
And what do you do? What do you do with that once you have all of these realizations? Where do you go with it?
When you have the realizations, I'm quite exhausted. It's quite a painful process.
Well, Prof, I'm going to bring you in here because, I've been for quite a few sessions, and it's incredibly enlightening at times. It's very depressing at other times. I felt like a victim wanting to blame a million other people, and then I just thought, okay, now what am I supposed to do with this? And that's why I'm asking you the question, Leroy. Professor, what are we supposed to do when we've identified certain things, when we're able to go back and we see why these situations happen, why we respond in a certain way? How do we identify it and move on and be able to put it behind us? Can we ever put something like that behind us?
Yes, and I think part of the challenge is to recognize, and both of your other panelists have outlined it very nicely, that there may be tactics that you learn, even skills that help you survive, help you get through the crises while you're a child, that you stick to. They are the top of your toolbox. They work. And then you find later in life they've become habits. This is how, someone once said, if the only tool in your box is a hammer, everything looks like a nail and you hit it. You tend to use those methods, and then you're puzzled why they don't work, but you don't have a repertoire. You don't have a range of skills to say, okay, let's try this way instead, or a variant on that. You tend to use the tools that used to work, and you're often very puzzled and troubled that these are not working for you now. And therefore, I think it's very important, both in this specific setting and more broadly, to learn that we're not a perpetual victim of our history. What we can achieve is to learn what happened. I can't change that. My mother was who she was, and she did what she did. That is unalterable. But the lessons I learned from that may have been inaccurate, and maybe I can change those. The habits I developed then, if they're not helpful now, I can revise those. So we can't change what happened to us, but we can change how we choose to react to that. And that's where we have the ability to rise above and beyond whatever happened in our history.
Leroy, I see you nodding your head in agreement. If you from a young age were learning something like, you use the word manipulation, you knew where the scene was going, you would then change the subject, compliment your mother, and then it would just move in another direction. Now, for some people, they would say that's a wonderful skill to have in life, because you're learning to read other people. It's a great interpersonal skill. You can be charming, or you can whatever. You use the word manipulation. So obviously you're looking at it, using it in a negative way. How do you change something like that? So when you meet someone, and if the conversation or whatever is happening between you and another person is not going the way you want it to, does the trigger come in? Do you then want to manipulate and turn around? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, it actually does depend on the conversation and who I'm choosing to interact with. But we have this thing of if I have to state my point or my opinion more than twice, I'm probably trying to control that conversation, and I'm not letting it flow freely.
And is that a bad thing?
For me, yes.
Okay.
Well, it may be an unhelpful thing.
Yeah. Maybe an unhelpful.
Sometimes you're in a situation where you may need to take charge of a particular conversation. But if that's what you do in every occasion, even when you don't need control, and when there may be negative effects of doing so, then you've got a habit rather than a tool.
Okay.
Yes.
Pat, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's very important for us, it is to learn the general behaviors and feelings, so that when you go through them, you can identify them quickly.
Okay.
And in our program, we have 12 of them. And what we're discussing right now is that adult children of alcoholics have difficulty with intimate relationships. And they have difficulty with intimate relationships because of the manipulation. They always want to be above. They always want to make sure that they get what they want. They don't know how to be vulnerable, and how to allow the other person to be vulnerable. And therefore, there is never any intimacy. When they get into a relationship where intimacy begins to flourish, they push it away. And that becomes, they sabotage their own relationships. And once you begin to understand that whole concept, and you start looking at how it manifests in you, in your behaviors, it is at that point that you can now start an intervention and say, I'm choose not to do this next time. I'll do something different.
So you have to be conscious all the time,
yes,
of how you're reacting, of what you're saying. Okay.
Always you
That's
have
tough,
to have
hey?
the awareness. Yes, it's a lot of mental work, spiritual work, whatever you want to call it, but it's work. Yeah.
You've got the list there. Can you perhaps just tell us a little bit more about those?
I have to take my glasses off.
Take them all.
Yeah. The first one says adult children of alcoholics guess at what normal behavior is. They have no idea of what normal behavior is because they've lived in an environment that's shaky all the time. Adult children of alcoholics have difficulty following a project through from beginning to end. Adult children of alcoholics lie when it would be just as easy to tell the truth. That's the habit that the doctor was talking about. It becomes a habit. And even when there is no need for lying, you find yourself lying. Adult children of alcoholics judge themselves without mercy. They have these people talking in their head. I used to say I live with a nation inside my head, and they're always fighting, and therefore I'm the one who bears the brunt of their conflict in my head. Adult children of alcoholics have difficulty having fun. That's another difficulty we have. It's difficult to have fun. You struggle with what should I do because we're always on guard. We're always making sure that things are not going to get out of hand. The wheels won't fall, so it's difficult to play. Adult children of alcoholics take themselves seriously. And then number 7 is the one that we spoke about, that they have difficulty with intimate relationships. 8, adult children of alcoholics overreact to changes over which they have no control. It's not that they react to changes. It is the ones that they don't have control on. And once they feel out of control, then they overreact. Adult children of alcoholics constantly seek approval and affirmation We've heard about that today. Adult children of alcoholics usually feel that they are different from other people. And 11, adult children of alcoholics are super responsible or super irresponsible. And I found that in my case, in some situations I'd be super responsible, and in others I'd be super irresponsible. And the last one says adult children of alcoholics are impulsive. They tend to lock themselves into a course of action without giving serious consideration to alternative behaviors or possible consequences. This impulsivity leads to confusion, self-loathing, and loss of control over their environment. In addition, they spend an excessive amount of energy cleaning up the mess.
So for you, Pat, I mean, how did you come across adult child for Al-Anon? How did you join them, and what happened with you? What's
I'm an
your story?
alcoholic, and I was at a stage where I couldn't go on anymore, and I almost killed myself. And by God's grace, I found Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe I should say Alcoholics Anonymous found me. Found you. And I worked the program very seriously.
From word go?
From the word go. I'm that type of. I'm addictive.
When you said you either do something very responsibly, yes, or you do something very...
I don't do it totally. Yes. So I went into it. There's a line in the AA book that says, "We are not saints." I used to listen to them and say, "No, don't worry. Give me 5 years. I should be one by that." So I really worked hard on the program. But as the years went by, I found that as much as I was really glad about my progress and my growth, there was something missing. And I used to attend conventions every year. During Easter, we have AA conventions. And every time in the convention, the main meeting has a speaker from AACA. And I'd listen to them and I'd identify with them. And I'd ask myself, why do I identify with these people? Because my parents are not alcoholic. And I think I was 9 years sober when I decided to start attending AACA and see if I couldn't get any benefit out of it. And after 2 years of being in the AACA fellowship, then I was discussing with one of my cousins who said to me, and I was saying, "I don't understand why." And she said to me, "Your grandpa, didn't you know?"
Your grandfather was an alcoholic?
Yes.
So how does that affect you? How did it pass down to you?
Through my mom.
Okay.
Yes. She survived. And she had the survival behaviors. And she took those survival behaviors in her adulthood into her own new family. And then they were passed on to me. Because we couldn't understand her as children. Sometimes she was quite scary. When we were teenagers, we made fun of it. But for a young child, her mood could just change just like that, which is a typical behavior of adult children. And there were certain things that didn't make sense, that couldn't add up. She was quite a powerful woman, a great provider, but she had to survive, and she never got the tools that we got. And therefore, these were passed on to us. And I picked up most of it, and I became the only alcoholic out of my siblings.
Well, that's an interesting question, and that's something I want to talk about after the break. And Professor, perhaps you can come in there, is asking, how many siblings do you have?
We were 4.
And you're the only one. So
only
you all grew up in the same home,
yes,
same circumstances. Your mother was the same to everybody, but you responded in a particular way. And that's one of the things I'm very interested in, is what makes the one person respond in one way and another not. And I think that your story, Pat, has highlighted why it's so important to be having this conversation today. Because we go through life and we're not sure why we're responding the way we are, or why we're having these kind of dysfunctional relationships. And we don't even have to go back and say maybe it was a grandfather who was an alcoholic. There are things that have happened in our past that perhaps we cannot track, but we're certainly experiencing the after effects of it today. And so that's why I think it's an important conversation to have today. So we're going to take a quick break. We will be back. Marguerite, I'd love to hear your story as well in a moment. So please do stay where you are. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, my name is S.V. Prinsloo. and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Welcome. This is Conversations with Niki. I'm Niki Seberini. It's great to be with you. We're having such an interesting conversation about adult children, children of alcoholics. And we're going to continue with this conversation, but I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners. That is Bay FM, that is Wild Coast FM, Neisner FM, MC 90.3 FM in Plettenberg Bay, West Coast FM, Kawi FM, High FM, and Eldo's FM. I mentioned that Conversations with Niki is turning a year old, and we've achieved great things, and we're having lots of fun, and we're exploring all sorts of topics. But the most important thing really is that Conversations with Niki is a force for good, and I hope that that's what you're getting out of the show. I hope that each and every week you tune in, and at times you're entertained, but you're informed and you're inspired, and that this show has created opportunities for you to live the kind of life you want to live in whichever way you want to live it, and really that is what we strive to do here on the show. So I mentioned also that Byron Katie, I'm going to be interviewing a woman that I've been following for a long time. I really do admire the work and looking at questions and what's happening in your head and what's happening in reality. If you're interested, and perhaps you know of Byron Katie, and you would like a session with Byron Katie on the show, she will take you through the work, because what's so fascinating about her is when she asks you the questions, that's when those aha moments happen. She is an absolute genius when it comes to that. So if you'd like the opportunity to do that, please go to the website www.conversationswithniki. Niki is spelled Niki, and it's .co.za, and just go to the contact Niki, make contact with me, or you can make contact via my Facebook page, Conversations with Niki, and we are going to select one of the listeners. Looking forward to that one. So we're just talking really about such a fascinating topic. It's adult children. I have fantastic guests in the studio. Marguerite, we haven't heard your story yet. We are coming to you, so I'd like to once again welcome Marguerite. Leroy has shared some part of his story. We have Pat, who's also shared a small part of his story, and we have Professor Michael Simpson as well. And Marguerite, before we go to your story, I just want to continue, Pat, because you were explaining that you are an alcoholic, and do we call it a recovering alcoholic? Is that how? I'm not sure what the correct terminology is.
Yeah,
recovering, whatever. I struggle. I'm struggling.
And recovered and all that. I mean, I am an alcoholic in recovery.
Okay, an alcoholic in recovery, and you with this 12-step program that you embarked on, you put everything into. You felt that there was still more,
yes.
And that's when you were drawn to the adult children, because you realized that the way you brought up in your environment created certain reactions. Can I say reactions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that in fact it was your grandfather who was an alcoholic. It had been passed down to your mother. She was behaving and reacting as an adult child, and that passed on to you.
Yeah.
And I said it's quite interesting to think, because you've got 4 siblings. You mentioned one is a physician, one is a dermatologist, and
they're on computer.
Okay, so have you thought? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about it. I'm sure you've sat down and thought about why did I become an alcoholic?
I believe there's nature, there's nurture, there's nature. I believe I came here into this world, and there was already something not okay. And therefore, when the world presented the stimulus that I met up with, the environment that I lived in, I am kind of a very fearful person. I'm a type of person who is too much in his head. And Leroy spoke about I lived in my fantasies, or I lived in my memories, because I couldn't deal with the present moment. I don't know if it's genetic or not, but basically that's how I was. And so I've come to understand that it's more what happens within me than what was happening outside, because my siblings have been able to deal with it in a different way.
Because outside they experience the same thing.
Yes. Yes.
What do you have to say about that, Professor?
This has always interested me, because it's obvious that we focus on the person who is obviously in distress. But in exactly this sort of situation, when we can say 3 or 4 children were in the same environment, one developed problems of whatever sort and others didn't, we can learn from each side, and from studying the well ones, which we usually don't ever think of, we may learn something about how did they manage to avoid that route. And part of the issue is, as was said, genetically we vary, even within a family. Just as we vary slightly in our physical appearance and build, there's a resemblance, but we're not identical unless we're twins. Some of us are more vulnerable, and not necessarily to everything. There may be a lock and key thing. Some of us may be very vulnerable to situations which fortunately never turn up in our life. And some may be particularly vulnerable to exactly what happens, and their brothers and sisters aren't. Some of us develop, and it's a fairly recent field of study, resilience. Some kids bounce back amazingly. There was a story in the news of a baby in New York, I think, who fell 11 stories and survived. Now, that should never happen, but thank goodness it does sometimes. Some of us are more resilient, again, particularly to some problems or some challenges than others. And it's this combination that's interesting. What I wish we knew more about was, is it simply a matter of luck? Like pulling the handle on a slot machine. Some of us, it comes up with a combination that means we will have problems in this family or with those parents, and with others we won't. Or is it that the lucky ones that don't become damaged by it have, without realizing it, some techniques, some things they're doing that work very well, and that maybe we could teach other young people in that situation so that they might better protect themselves. We've already talked about how people may develop habits that seem to be survival tools early on but turn out not to be. Maybe we could learn new tools. Maybe that's one of the things schools should be doing rather than algebra, is teaching us more survival skills so that more of us are better able to do that.
Too true. I'm going to, I think we'll come back to this probably some more, but Marguerite, I'd like to hear your story, because both Pat and Leroy spoke about having an alcoholic background, but your story is very different, and that's why I started off asking about what is dysfunctional, because it comes from a dysfunctional family. Perhaps you can just expand on that.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Yeah, I think I'm a highly functional dysfunctional.
Highly functional dysfunctional.
Yeah, so I was kind of surprised when I landed up eventually in Akka and realizing that I am an adult child, because I didn't have an alcoholic family.
Okay.
I do have a dysfunctional family, and with all respect, I still love them very much. And I have great respect for how they've coped with life. Unfortunately, I think these things pass on, just like Pat said. So both my parents are products of alcoholic families. And
did you know that when you were growing up? Did they mention that their parents were alcoholics?
Okay, so this is the crux of my family dysfunction. We have one very primary dysfunction, and that's denial. So unfortunately, as a result of this, I was aware, but it was never really discussed. I think there's a lot more that happened than even what I know today. Obviously, as I have walked my own journey, I've uncovered more and more of the truth, and a lot of it very harsh truths, and very deep wounding in many areas in my family and the lineage of my family, even their parents and their parents. So the effect of the dysfunction in my family, where denial was basically denying of emotions, denying of truth, denying of what happened, denying clear visible signals and signs that for example, I was suffering and that there was something that happened to me that was not detected, not noted, not addressed. And the result of that is that as a child, and I can say to you, you can see in my body, I have a strong warrior shape,
Yes.
and I come across to be brave, but I'm probably one of the scariest people out there in this world. People scare me. The world scares me, right? So, and I'm across to be very brave, and I've done extreme things. I've done very brave things as well, but it's all extreme. It's all the other side of a pendulum of fear, like just gung-ho about so many things about life. And it's all about keeping a secret. It's all about hiding from my own vulnerability and not realizing, and today I know that my own vulnerability is my greatest strength. Where previously it was vehemently denied. And alongside with that, admitting to the truth, admitting to the original wound, allowing the truth to come to surface. I have to let go, and that's what this ACCA really provided for me, the opportunity to let go of guilt and shame, which was the primary thing that kept me caged and in major dysfunction.
So was it, how did you come across them? How did you, because it's part of, they saying adult children of alcoholics.
Yeah.
So how did you make that connect?
I have angel friends. I have a wonderful friend who's been a mentor, teacher, and I've been talking to her, and I think she realized at some point not so long ago that I have all the symptoms of an adult child. She has been in a program herself, or other different kind of programs, but I think she gently, well, at times not so gently, coached me into attending this meeting. It was also just at the right time, because when I got to ACCA, I was in a bad state. I was very near suicidal. I was in an extremely dysfunctional situation. I was basically, for me, ACCA was ICU. If it wasn't for ACCA, I don't think I would have been here today.
So you was it just getting progressively worse because of this denial and because of this secret?
Yeah. So one of the biggest problems for me was I had no understanding why I'm manifesting all these destructive behaviors.
Okay.
I was self-destructive from the word go,
Mm-hmm.
and it got progressively worse. And just when I think, I don't know how many people have, in the last 2 years I had near-death experiences every 6 months. So that's extreme. And I got to a point like, what is going on with me?
How come you were having near-death experiences? Were you doing these extreme sports?
Got myself into sticky situations. I firstly, like death was a big thing for me. So I first got, manifested cancer 10 years ago, and then from there it's like all these weird and extreme scenarios and situations and people, and yeah, it's just like really weird things. So I got to it, it's like, what's going on with me? Why am I having all these experiences, and why is it that why am I so self-destructive? Why am I so hell-bent on destroying myself? I had no idea, because remember, the truth was denied within me too. So I couldn't heal it because I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know I was a codependent. I didn't even know I was an adult child. So I had no means of help, and I've done massive amounts of self-development work. And yes, all of it has its merits, but I can tell you, this is the only program that gave me the tools.
Amazing. You talk about your grandparents being alcoholics. So then your parents were adult children.
Yeah, they were.
So those 12 pointers that Pat pointed out there.
Yeah.
So they obviously resonate very deeply for you, because it was in that environment that you grew up.
Yes. They were adult children and codependent on both, on each other. They still are.
Okay. Let's just look at codependent, because that's a word that we use a lot, and I think it's quite difficult to define.
Yeah.
How would you define it within the relationship of your between your parents?
It's a false notion that you cannot live without the other person, and the great, deep, very need to control that person. Through either, in my mother's case it would be manipulation and control. In my father's case it would be through more subversive, latent actions. And in this way, they're managing each other. I mean, they've been married for 45 years, which is great. And I mean, it's actually amazing that they stay together. And now, obviously, things have transformed a lot and they're a lot better. And, you know, there's a lot more real love that exists in our family space. But just looking at their behaviors and how that impacted on us, you know, control being... and keeping the situation in control.
In control.
Making sure we're maintaining the image and making sure everything looks and appears functional when in the reality of it.
So that's interesting, because if you've grown up in a family like Leroy, you were talking about your mom, and you were talking about being able to manipulate a situation, but I'm sure if people were coming over and if your mom had a bit to drink, you just wanted to make sure that you could contain it, that everything would still look okay, that people would think that everything's okay. And was that real for you? Were you ever in that situation where you had to, as Marguerite's talking about, just have this pretense that everything's perfect and okay?
Oh, for sure. And like one of the most anxiety times were around Christmas and birthdays and holidays, when
really?
People would gather together.
Because you didn't know what was going to happen.
No. And one of the biggest aha moments in my recovery was where I learned that I have a choice, that I have an option to get out. I don't have to. So I learned to manipulate because I felt that I didn't have a choice to deal with the situation. So through my recovery, I've learned, excuse me, that I don't need this in my life, and I can choose not to partake in it. And that was when I first learned that I had a moment, like an aha moment, that I felt my first bit of recovery coming through, that I don't have to live like this anymore.
You don't have to. And for you, Marguerite, did you also, I mean, was that, you know, trying to create, and I'm just highlighting the differences here, because going back to Leroy, you were in the situation where your mother drank. Marguerite, you were not, but you were living in the aftermath of the destruction of before.
Yes.
Which is just as real and is just as damaging.
Yes.
So when you went to ACA, the Adult Children's for Al-Anon, I keep forgetting the exact terminology, but and you said you know that worked for you better than anything else. Was it like for Leroy, like Leroy just explained, that choice, you can just let it go? Was it as simple as that for you? And I'm sorry, I'm not saying it was simple for you, Leroy. I'm sure it was one step.
I think the significant part here was that eventually that was very hard for me to come to that acknowledgement and the realization that it's okay, I don't have to be in control. That there is actually something like a higher power, which I've up until that point conceptually accepted, but didn't embrace with my entire being. And I think this is the crux of this program, where you actually hand it over. You hand yourself over and you say, I'm powerless. And even my best thinking didn't get me anywhere. So clearly, you know, I got there, my entire life was a mess. And I think most of us, you know, I'm sure Leroy and Pat will concur, by the time most people get there, there's pretty much nothing left of your life. It's such a mess. And it's a great place of surrender, you know, when you get there, when you realize, okay, well, you know, yeah, I'm not in control, I've never been in control, I can hand it over. And the relief of being able to take all of the stuff that you've been carrying all this time, you know, and saying, help me, I'm powerless in this, I'm handing my life and will into your loving care. You know, this is and just being able to say that and being able to do that, and then going through the process of shedding all the unhealthy learned behaviors, because that's what it is, it's learned at all, and finding who you really are in this entire thing, which is great, because many of us now start manifesting our true personalities, our true gifts and strengths, and we're emerging from this gunk, you know, that we've been cluttered with, the mud that doesn't belong to us at all.
So a huge part of this healing process is admitting that you're powerless and handing it over.
Yeah.
Pat?
Yep, definitely it's the surrender.
Surrendering.
You know, in my case, I was able to surrender my alcoholism, and I never drank. I'm 17 years sober now. At the time, I was 9 years...
Quite a difficult concept. I'm trying to get my head around it. You're just surrendering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you see, what I'm trying to say here is I was able to surrender, and the process of surrendering is where you you are able to convince convince yourself, your innermost self, about the fact that I don't have control over this. And I was able to do that with alcohol. But for the next 9 years, I still couldn't let go of the behaviors, those that had helped me to survive.
Very important. It's very important. So
those I could not surrender because I didn't see them. There was no awareness of them. I could see their outcome, but I didn't know where they came from. And when I went into AACA, I became aware, and I was able to identify those coping mechanisms, those behaviors, those feelings that I carried around, those thoughts that resulted in my behaviors. And therefore, I was now able to surrender them, because within each one of them are illusions. Like we spoke about, if I can just control this person, if I can make them right, then everything will be okay. That's a codependent illusion. You know. And once I was able to identify that, and the funny part is that you identify it at different levels, at the gross level, and just when you think, now I've let go of it, you find that there's another level which is slightly lower. And when you're sure you've got that one, there's a deeper one which is very subtle. And then there's a time when you feel you've really let go. And from time to time, some of these things, they pop up again, and that's why we keep going to meetings.
How did your life change? How did your life change? You know, being sober all that time, but still feeling there was something more. Then going in, digging, going peeling those layers away.
I would say, how is my life changing?
Okay.
Because I'm still in the process.
Are we always going to be in the process? And I say we, because we're all learning and growing and making mistakes.
Yes. And how it's changing, the biggest change I'm experiencing is, I'll give you an example of something that happened a few days ago. I was asked by my wife to do something, and I forgot about it. Totally. And I remembered late. Which meant that when she came back, she would be able to see that I had not done it, because it needed sunlight. Okay. And so I did it. And then when in the morning, when we started talking, because she came back late in the morning, and she said, "You didn't do that." For the first time, I didn't feel any knot inside my stomach. It was like, yeah, I didn't do it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to forget it, but
it was as simple as that.
It was just as simple as that. And that's the most significant part of my recovery. That now I can face life without the hochas in my head.
And for some people listening, it's part of what they wouldn't think twice about that. For you, it's this incredible moment where everything shifts.
It's the same as coming into the studio here. And there's just peace within me. We talk of it as serenity.
Serenity.
And I'm not worried that I'm going to say something stupid. If I do say something stupid, I'll probably laugh at it, and that's okay. You know, I'm not worried about that. You remember one of the symptoms, it says we judge ourselves very harshly. We're supposed to be perfect in everything that we do, and if we're not perfect, there's a part of our mind that hammers us, that we do a lot of self-flagellation. And now I'm able to catch myself when I start condemning myself, and I say, okay, so that's what I'm doing, it's not necessary, and I leave it alone, and I'm able to move on with life. Because in the past, those feelings and those thoughts were debilitating. They would stop me dead on my tracks, and I couldn't do anything for the day.
It's emancipation.
Yes.
I mean, you've been freed. You've literally freed yourself.
Yes.
Leroy, you were going to say something.
One of the things that we should say is that in working this recovery, you actually reparent yourself. So based on what you learn in the group, that you can actually use the group as a sounding board of what normal is, and you just start adjusting your behaviors and adjusting your attitudes. One of the best things about being an adult child is being an alcoholic myself, I knew that there was a problem because it was something physical and I drank it. But my dysfunctional behaviors, I didn't really know what was wrong, but I knew something was wrong and I felt very alone. And coming into the group and relating with other people who feel the same way that I do, I felt that I wasn't alone, and that has been, it's created a safe environment for me which I didn't have in my family of origin, and I refer to this group as my family, because it's very safe. There's patience, there's love, there's listening, there's support, there's all of the things that my family lacked I find in the group, and that group has been very, very helpful to me.
And what do? Do you meet once a week and you stand up and you share your story? Is that how it works?
Yeah, we actually meet twice a week in Johannesburg. One is a study group on a Thursday night, and then an open share on a Monday night. And I try my best to make both of those meetings and just to share and to listen to other people's shares. And
how long have you been a part of it?
This is 3 years now.
3 years. And you, Pat?
Should be 7.
Marguerite?
That's a year and a half for me.
A year and a half. And this is a family for you?
Yeah.
This is not just a little quick fix that you go to for a short period of time and then move on. This is your family.
Yeah, in order to be able to heal, you really have to change your lifestyle. It becomes a new lifestyle. You live a totally different way from the one that you're used to. Yeah.
Prof, what are your thoughts on this concept of surrendering, realizing that you're not in control and you surrender?
I think one of the important elements is recognizing that you don't have to be in control. Obviously, all these people are in control of some of their lives. Otherwise, I'd be even more terrified to be driving on the roads. They control lots of things, but it's more a question of perspective, that some things nobody can control, so don't beat yourself up because you can't. Some things don't need to be controlled, so don't waste energy controlling stuff that doesn't matter. It's an issue of perspective, and I think what also came across from what they're saying of their experiences in the program is an issue, or two related issues. One is a matter of patience, because what often happens with various types of therapy is people say, well, I've had a session now and I'm not better, so sod that, I'm going to do something else, or just give up. It's a process, and that's the other element that I think came across strongly, is the idea that life is a process. You can continue to find ways to improve, but you may never finish that, and maybe that's a good thing. What would you do tomorrow if you'd finished all the possible improvements in your life today? It's a gradual process, and as long as it's heading in the right direction, that should be very satisfying.
Let me ask you, Marguerite, it's a year and a half that you've been with adult children, and you said it, for you it was ICU. You were at the lowest point. And I loved what Pat said. You said it's not, what have you got, but what are you still getting every single day? And for you, this experience growing up, do your parents, do your family support you? Do they know where you are? And has this affected the whole family structure?
They're aware that I'm in this program. I have a very dysfunctional brother who's also a doctor living in the States. And I've been trying to, nudge him towards attending some of these meetings in the States, because actually started there, so he's very lucky. But they, as being a very academic space and very kind of left brain and all being in denial, I'm kind of the only odd one that's in this very weird ACCA group. So I think they, it's again,
slowly
they'll see they already saw a lot of my transformation happening. And for me, I think at the end, it doesn't have to try and convince people to attend these meetings. Be the transformation, be the change, and people will go, okay, what have changed in your life, and why is things so much different for you? And that's the reason. So for me, the primary thing that's changed is I found my voice, and when I found my voice, I found myself.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I want to thank all of you for coming onto the show and for, sharing your stories and revealing yourselves. And in so doing, I'm really hoping that there's some people who are listening who so connect with your experiences or some part of it, and who will be able to move forward and perhaps find that light and that wonderful brotherhood and sisterhood that you have all found. So thank you, Marguerite, thank you, Pat, thank you, Leroy. It's been really so special having you on the show, and Professor, thank you. It's been wonderful. I hope you'll join us again on Conversations with Niki. Professor Michael Simpson, thank you. And thank you for joining me. I really hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. Thank you for staying tuned. If you did miss part of the show, please don't worry. We will be podcasting it within the next couple of days. I'll be putting it onto the website, www.conversationswithniki.co.za. Have yourself a good week. Be kind to yourself. Until next week, for me, goodbye.
Hi, my name is Esvia Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by Studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.